So what I'd like to do is to think about the ways in which there are three components of urbanism that link the past and the present. The real building blocks of urbanism are primarily people, places, and the resultant possibilities. Even though we might think that the cities of the ancient world and the cities of today must have been so very different because we have electricity and they didn't, and we have BART and they didn't, what I can say is that in those categories of people, places, and possibilities, modern and ancient cities were exactly the same. So there are a number of ways that we can sort of peel back those layers of time and think about how urban continuities, how the idea of being an urban animal is something that is now with us and is going to be with us forever, or at least the next 10,000 years. So what do modern and ancient cities have in common? First of all, there's monumental architecture, that sense of people building things that are much greater than what any particular family would need or what any community would need for any kind of temporary purpose. What we have is monumental architecture that is often functional, sometimes entirely symbolic, like Coit Tower or the Eiffel Tower or any of those other kinds of towers. But it's the capacity to make and imagine large-scale structures that really links the past and the present. Another thing that cities have in common all over the world are divisions of labor. So even though we often think about Adam Smith and the Wealth of Nations as describing how it is that we can have more efficient production processes by dividing labor and having people specialize in tasks, this is something that smart managers knew 6,000 years ago as well. We can see in the Roman world that there were firings of kilns to produce ceramic vessels, 20 to 25,000 pieces at a time. So this massive quantities of production and consumption and also discard is something that we can clearly see in every urban settlement, past or present. Another thing that we get in both modern and ancient cities are the diverse economies that characterize the migrations of people coming in and the specialties of different kinds of activities that people are willing to take a chance on. A long time ago, the archaeologist V. Gordon Childe talked about how being in a city was a godsend for somebody who was manufacturing something like metal tools that farmers might need only once or twice a year. So they couldn't keep somebody like that in a village. They had to have this itinerant way of life until cities came up and made it possible for somebody to produce something very utilitarian or even very esoteric and be able to have customers every single day coming to them. So this is why cities are places of innovation. And when you think about Fashion Week is always in a city. When you think about tech innovations, they're almost always in cities, so that that large number of producers is met by a large number of consumers. We also get urban planning as something that we find in every urban settlement, past and present. And oftentimes, archaeologists have looked only at kind of the downtown areas of ancient settlements, where that sense of planning is the most regularized. We're only now starting to look at some of the outlying areas where planning is often escaped by the people who live in them. So suburban areas and slum areas of ancient cities are places where we can see that the urban planning ethos has not quite reached, just as we have the same concerns for our own growing cities, both here in the US and in other places as well. We get extensive hinterlands, so that the products that come into urban settlements might come from an enormous distance. And yet, as a consumer, you know that when you go to a market, you will be able to find what you need, whether it's an apple from Belgium or an apple from New Zealand or an apple from Shasta County. You know, as a consumer, all these pathways of transportation bring things to you that you want and need from that diverse and often distant hinterland. And finally, it's the social networks that make it possible for people in cities to interact with their neighbors, to interact with their friends, and also, very importantly, to interact with strangers.